This 7 Minutes to a Better West Virginia is brought to you by New River Community and Technical College. Your next step to a great career.
My name's Scott Miller. I am the Executive Director of Just for Kids. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and then talk about my idea for West Virginia. I have 2 grandchildren. I have 6 children, and I've been married for 20 years. I live in Lewisburg. I did grow up in New York City, so I am a foreigner here in West Virginia, but I call it home, and I've been here for over 30 years, and all of my children have been raised here. I have a real diverse background in terms of work. One of my first jobs was as a Baskin-Robbins ice cream scooper. I've been a chimney sweep, a dairy farmer, and more recently, a teacher at a small school in Lewisburg. For 13 years, I was the state coordinator of the West Virginia Family Support Program. This is a program that worked with families across the state who had children with disabilities who are living at home. And it was a very exciting time in my life. I learned a lot about disabilities, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In my current job as Just for Kids director, I need to explain that a little bit, because often I'll say, oh, have you heard of Just for Kids? And people say yes, but they really don't have any idea of what we do. What we do is we work closely as a team with law enforcement, prosecuting attorney's office, and with Child Protective Services. As a team, when they get a call about a child who's been abused physically, emotionally, and sexually, they call us and we interview that child in our child-friendly facility. This model is a national model. There are 750 child advocacy centers in the country. There are 20 in West Virginia. And we need to grow a few more in West Virginia to be able to cover the whole state. So I'm going to talk a lot more about that in my 5 minutes remaining, but I hope that it will really make a difference in what I'm going to say. And so let me get started. My idea for really making a change in West Virginia is that we really need to include more women in decision-making bodies. Now, I know that the women hearing this get that. They understand that. And there's some men who are thinking, oh, that's an interesting idea. And there's some men who think, no way, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I really want to speak to those folks who are skeptical about this idea that more women need to be involved in decision-making in our state, and that the difference that it will make. And I'm going to just talk about my experiences and how I came to that. I'm a fairly slow learner, so it's taken me 4 or 5 years to really get this and really believe it, but I really do believe it, and I know that it would make a difference. For 13 years in the Family Support Program, this was a state-run program through the Department of Health and Human Resources, I worked with families across the state who had children at home who had disabilities. And they were hurting because they weren't getting the supports that they needed. And I literally had to fight with my colleagues in state government to assure that some of the things that they needed, they could get. And it was a fight. And what I learned was that in this male-dominated state government world that we live in, majority rules. Well, people with disabilities are a minority, so there's not much chance that the minority was going to get what they needed because the majority ruled. And so it set up a situation where there had to be a fight rather than collaboration and cooperation to come to an understanding and support. Now, I have to say, in the 13 years, a lot of things happened for people with disabilities, and many people got the things that they needed for their kids, and it's still a process, and there are people with disabilities who are fighting for their rights. So I'm not saying that it can't happen in this male-dominated world, but as we can see what's happening in Washington, it's a challenging situation when men see themselves in this role of gladiator or have to be a winner and a loser. And that's a problem that I see. And so now I'm going to talk about my last 3 years working in very much a women-led organization. And that's this Child Advocacy Center model. It started about 25 years ago in Alabama. And it wasn't just women. There are men very much involved, and I think women are very clear that there has to be a balance. It can't just be my way as a woman or your way as a man, but we need to work together. And that really makes sense to me, and I see the outcomes of that in the work that I do now. 10 years ago in Beckley, West Virginia, when a child disclosed abuse, a police officer interviewed that child, another law enforcement person probably did, up to 10 people, social workers, lawyers, child protective service workers. And what we know now is that every time that child was interviewed, they were re-traumatized. And in fact, new research shows that sometimes that trauma was more intense, more traumatizing than the actual abuse that occurred. That being asked 10 times, what happened to you last night, traumatizes that child for life in a way that now, at a child advocacy center, a child comes in, they play with toys in our child-friendly space, and they're interviewed by one person who's trained to work with children and ask them questions, and that's it. And so we know we're doing a better job. We also provide counseling if the child discloses, and we work with the family around advocacy. And the other big piece is that we work with law enforcement, as I said, and child protective services, which again were traditionally male-dominated organizations. And they didn't have the sense of, oh, we have to treat a child differently than we do an adult. And so the Child Advocacy Center model has infused a sense of working with kids in such a different way that really makes a difference for the child and the family. And the outcomes for that child, they will be traumatized for the rest of their life. We can't take that away, but we have learned ways to work with kids that hopefully they can live a more normal life for the rest of their life. And we see children doing that. So I know that a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have this women's involvement and thinking in driving the work. And so that's one example how I see how women have really made a difference. And it's that balance. Just think about what we're missing by not including women in making decisions. It's over 50% of the population is women. How can we say that it's not important to hear what women are thinking and what they're saying isn't important? It is important. One example that just hit me in the face over the last week was Queen Elizabeth. In 1550, England was bankrupt, had been at war for 100 years, and was really going down the tubes. She became queen. Within 20 years, she had signed 2 peace treaties. The country was not at war anymore, and she honored the arts and sciences to the point where now that period was known as the Elizabethan era because of one woman. It's just phenomenal to me that we don't think about that. It's not in our consciousness that how important the role of women are in decision making. And somehow we have to get back to that. I want to just end with saying that my experience has shown that West Virginia will be a more vibrant, healthy, and prosperous state when we include more women and their sensibilities in decision making. So thank you very much, and have a great day.